So, what is globalization? I was asked to make a project by the school, Miss Alice, on what globalization means to me. But first of all, I should know what globalization is. So, according to Wikipedia, globalization is the process of international integration arising from worldviews, products, ideas, and other aspects of culture. Well, this definition here, that was a bit vague. So, I'll simplify it as this. Globalization is world integration, whether it is through culture, economy, or geography. And these are the three main aspects. So I'll start by talking about geography. Since the dawn of time, humans have always been very curious, and they've always wanted to see what's beyond. Through technologies available to them at the time, many people have made a difference by exploring new areas for geographical globalization. One of these persons being Marco Polo. Marco Polo was one of the first Europeans to go to China. His journey took 35 years because at that time sea transportation wasn't very reliable and he wouldn't be able to do it by sea, so he went walking. Marco Polo was very important for geographical globalization because he literally created the first route to China before boats were very popular. And he also brought back from China many icons and innovations which later became European icons but which were actually created in China, such as the ice cream and the pasta. Another great example of geographical globalization is the great explorers such as Christopher Columbus and Vasco da Gama, because Vasco da Gama, he created a route to India that went below Africa. And that was very important because at that time spices were expensive and everyone wanted them and only India had them. Christopher Columbus is another great example of geographical globalization because he discovered the American continent. He thought that if you circumnavigated the world, you would eventually get to India. But the American continent was in the way. So he got to there first, and he's very famous for discovering it. This all happened around the 15th century. And as you can see, all of them had one goal in mind, which is to find India, to find a route to India, to get the spices. And all of them had the same goal. But Christopher Columbus, he discovered the Americas, Vasco da Gama discovered their fruits, Pedro Alves Cabral discovered Brazil, but they all had the same goal. This time, around the 15th and 16th century, was also known as the Great Age of Exploration, because most of those findings happened around this date, and that's when the world really expanded, because before that, the world was mostly Europe and a little bit of Africa, but after that, the world got really big. As I said, those places were discovered, but they weren't really discovered because they were already there, and most of them already had people living there, such as the Chinese or the Indians. But that doesn't mean anything. When we say they were discovered, we're not saying they were discovered, literally, because they were already there. We're just saying they were integrated to the common world, which is Europe. The developed world, the world in development, the world where all the development happens. We need to ask ourselves, why did the Europeans want to visit these new worlds? Why? Well, there are two main reasons, one of them being economy and the other being culture. The Europeans went to those places for their natural goods and local resources, such as the spices, the silks, things which Europeans didn't know how to do or couldn't do, but for example Indians could. They also visited those places to spread their culture, to spread the Christian religion, to spread their ways of eating. The Europeans also had to learn many things to make this journey, such as knowing how to make better ships, better astronomy instruments to know where they're going. And they also learn many things from the people they met, such as new ways of planting, as well as many other things. In general, this all contributed to a more globalized world, where everything is integrated. This exploration part being the first part of globalization, because where things were discovered. But then new advances were made, such as the airplane, such as the rocket, many different things. Because even though those places were discovered, it took you months to get there, months to come back, and you would only do the journey once in your life. Nowadays, you can easily buy a ticket and go to like Malaysia, for example. Another great advancement in geographical globalization came during the Industrial Revolution, through mass production, where a factory produced tens of thousands of the same item of clothing, while the small store only produced tens or twenties. More closer to modern times, a lot of things that have impulsed geographical globalization are standardizing issues, where you standardize some sort of thing to make transportation better. Another great example of standardization is the creation of the container by a man named Malcolm McLean in 1956. And in 1957, the first boat made entirely to transport containers was made. The container was a very important tool in transportation because it made transporting goods from one place of the world to another much quicker and with less use of space. It also made it easier for embarking and disembarking the cargo, where sometimes before containers were created, it would take days, and after containers were created, mere hours. Also talking about ships and containers, another great invention in 1968 was the standardization of the tools used to embark and disembark the cargo, which also sped up the process. Finally, another important issue of standardization was the railway tracks, where they all became one size, because before that happened, a person who wanted to travel by train from Portugal to Turkey had to make 7, 8 stops, and now they need to make one stop only. This railway track standardization enabled cargo to be transported by land quickly, because before that happened, the cargo had to be removed from the train and put into another train numerous times, and now it doesn't even need to be done. And finally, we cannot forget about aviation, because before aviation occurred, Australia was sometimes weeks, sometimes months away from countries, from the industrialized countries, and now it's only hours away. This also enabled transport between places to be much more frequent, and people are more frequently nowadays taking vacations far away from home. To finish geographical globalization off, we can't forget about the communication. Communication is very important. First with the radio, then the television, finally the internet. Because before all of that, if the King of Spain died, we would only know it months later. And after communication happened, mere minutes after it happened, we would already be knowing. In the 1960s, a Canadian writer named Marshall McLuhan popularized a term which was the global village. That saying means that the speed that information was passed from one side of the globe to the other was so fast that it looked like a village. Now let's talk a bit about economical globalization. Let's get this shirt here, for example, that I'm wearing. This shirt here says, "I walked the Brooklyn Bridge," which I did in 2010, right here. All of these shirts which were produced in one factory. And that factory isn't even in the United States, isn't in Brooklyn, it's actually in Bangladesh. As says right here, made in Bangladesh. And funnily enough, probably the cotton used to make this shirt isn't even made in Bangladesh. It's probably from Egypt farm or something. Now you might ask, why? Why is it all around the globe made? Isn't it better to just make it in just one place, and that would actually make it cheaper? It wouldn't, because man labor was the biggest cost in making all of these shirts. And the people in Bangladesh are willing to work for a much smaller salary than the people in the United States. But oh wait, Bangladesh isn't a very good silk producer, so they need to buy their silk from somewhere. They choose Egypt, which is a very good silk producer. Maybe the center where these shirts are produced is in the United States, where the people design the shirts, but the shirts aren't made there because it's just simply too expensive. A lot of companies do that. A transnational corporation is a corporation which might have been created in one country, but which acts globally, has factories everywhere. Considered to be the most transnational corporation in the world, Nestlé has factories literally everywhere. This brings us to a topic called transnational corporations. There are many transnational corporations. A lot of them started in the United States. A lot of them didn't, such as Nestlé or Shell. And where did Nestlé come from? Switzerland, which nowadays only represents this of Nestlé's financial business. And continuing on, Nestlé is present in a lot of things we do in our daily lives. You're at the beach and you buy Nestlé Picolé. Nestlé? You're drinking some Nescafé. Nestlé? Nestlé produces so much variety of food in so many different places that it's literally uncountable. Another important thing concerning transnational corporations is that Nestlé, for example, Nestlé's Nescafé, it's the same everywhere around the world. It tastes the same. McDonald's. The menu on McDonald's is the same, be it here or in China. They might have a slight change, but they always have the Big Macs, they always have all those things. Finally, we should talk about a little bit about culture, globalization culture, because culture has still a lot to do with globalization. We all know good old TV Globo, but did you know TV Globo exports their novelas to more than 80 different countries? A lot of our culture is based off of the dominating country of our era, this day being the United States. And since the Second World War, when the United States became a big example is the presence of Disney, Universal, movies. A lot of people, almost everyone in the world, watches American movies. But how many people watch Romanian movies? So I'll simplify it as this. Globalization is world integration, whether it is through culture, economy, or geography. In conclusion, without globalization, we would have a much more sparse world, where people wouldn't know what happens. Even though globalization was very good for the world, one bad aspect about it was that many people were decimated by it, like the Aztecs or Incas, when they didn't want to turn Christians. But in overall, globalization brought many good aspects to the world, which without it would have been much less advanced than it is nowadays. So I'll simplify it as this. Globalization is world integration, whether it is through culture, economy, or geography.